What if I told you that the poorest man in the world possessed the one exact thing a billionaire would give his entire fortune to buy? In a valley where the mountains kissed the sky lived Kalin, a merchant whose wealth was the stuff of legends. He had amassed more gold, silk, and jewels than any man could reasonably spend in 100 lifetimes. Yet, if you looked deeply into his eyes, you wouldn't see the sparkling reflection of a fulfilled and happy man. You would see pure, unadulterated terror. Every ticking second of the day, a heavy, suffocating weight pressed down upon his chest. He was utterly convinced that someone, somewhere, was plotting to take it all away. His vast fortune had not become a monument to his success. It had become a gilded prison, and he was its sole, miserable captive. Just a few miles away from Kalin's shadowy fortress, the world was painted in entirely different colors. Down a winding, dusty road bathed in golden sunlight walked a nomad named Elias. Elias owned nothing more than the tattered clothes on his back, a worn wooden walking stick, and a small cloth pouch slung over his shoulder. He had no vault to lock, no guards to pay, and no permanent roof over his head. By all societal measures, he was utterly destitute. But as he strolled beneath the cascading pink petals of the blooming cherry blossoms, he breathed in the sweet spring air as if he owned the entire earth. His spirit was lighter than the wind itself. Back in the sprawling estate, the night was Kalin's greatest enemy. While the rest of the world peacefully rested, his mind raced with endless, exhausting calculations. Did he secure the eastern gate? Did his top guard look at him suspiciously during dinner? What if the silk market crashed tomorrow morning? He would toss and turn in fine sheets that felt more like heavy iron chains, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. To Kalin, every shadow in his grand bedchamber was a potential assassin, and every gust of wind a thief breaking through the window. He was an absolute master of commerce, but he had completely bankrupted his own peace of mind. Morning broke, and while Kalin was just finally drifting into a fitful, nightmare-laced sleep, Elias was already enthusiastically greeting the dawn. The nomad sat beside the dirt road, his stomach rumbling loudly. He reached into his pouch and pulled out his only possession of actual value, a small, hardened piece of bread. It was his first real meal in 2 days. Just as he prepared to take a bite, a scruffy, trembling stray dog limped out from the brush, eyeing the food. Without a single second of hesitation or regret, Elias broke the bread in two, tossing the larger half to the grateful animal. His joy in that quiet moment of sharing was absolute. Fate has a funny way of weaving contrasting threads together. That very afternoon, Kalin was traveling to a neighboring city to inspect a newly acquired property. He rode in an armored carriage, surrounded by 12 armed guards, his face pale and drawn from his perpetual lack of sleep. As the carriage rumbled down the cherry blossom road, Kalin parted the heavy velvet curtains just a fraction to check his surroundings. There, sitting in the lush green grass, was Elias. The nomad was laughing a rich, booming laugh, wrestling playfully with the stray dog. Kalin stared, absolutely paralyzed by the scene. He couldn't comprehend the math of it. How could a man with absolutely nothing look so incredibly rich? The sheer impossibility of the nomad's happiness gnawed at Kalin's weary mind. It defied every rule of the world he knew. Unable to contain his burning curiosity, the merchant commanded his heavily armed escort to halt. He stepped out of the dark carriage and into the vibrant warmth of the afternoon sun, squinting against the blinding light. Walking toward the ragged man, Kalen's heavy silk robes rustled, making him look utterly foreign against the simple beauty of the cherry blossoms. He approached Elias not as a powerful lord, but as a starving man desperate for a secret recipe. Kalen stood over the nomad, his eyes darting around nervously as if searching for buried treasure. "Tell me," the merchant demanded, his voice tight with anxiety. "Where do you keep your gold? You must have a massive fortune hidden nearby to laugh with such reckless abandon in a world full of thieves and cutthroats." Elias slowly stopped petting the dog and looked up. He didn't see a powerful billionaire. He saw a deeply frightened, exhausted prisoner. A gentle, knowing smile touched the corners of Elias's mouth. "I have no gold, my friend," Elias replied softly. "I have nothing to steal." The merchant scoffed, shaking his head in total disbelief. "No gold? Then why aren't you weeping? You wear literal rags, you sleep in the dirt, and your lunch was a stale crust of bread." Elias gently picked up a fallen pink cherry blossom petal, holding it up to catch the golden rays of the sun. "I don't weep because my hands are empty," Elias explained, his voice as calm as a still lake. "I rejoice because my mind is light. I own only this exact moment, and this moment is incredibly beautiful. What more could I possibly need?" The profound simplicity of those words struck Kalen like a physical blow. He looked down at his trembling hands, fingers heavy with priceless emerald and ruby rings, and realized they were essentially beautiful shackles. "But the future," Kalen stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of his perpetual fear. "How do you protect yourself from tomorrow? I have a fortress, an army of guards, mountains of silver, and yet I haven't slept a full night in 10 years. The terror of losing what I have is slowly eating me alive from the inside out." Elias slowly rose to his feet, leaning slightly on his weathered wooden stick. He looked at the vast, endless blue sky, then back at the exhausted merchant. "You believe your wealth is your fortress, but it has become your master," Elias said with deep compassion. "You spend all your energy building higher walls to keep the world out, but you've only succeeded in locking yourself in. A man who clings tightly to a heavy stone will eventually drown trying to protect it. To float, you must be willing to open your hands and let it go." Kalen stood frozen, the nomad's profound words echoing loudly in his exhausted mind. He turned his head slowly, looking back at the heavily armored carriage waiting on the dusty road. The dark velvet curtains, the tense armed guards clutching sharp spears, the thick iron plating. It all suddenly looked less like luxurious transportation and exactly like a rolling cage. For a decade, he had traded his peace, his joy, and his freedom for the cold, hard comfort of metal and stone. He realized with a sickening drop in his stomach that he was the poorest man he had ever met. Desperate for a tangible solution, Kalen fell back on the only language he truly understood: money. His shaking hands reached deep into his expensive silk robes, retrieving a thick leather pouch bulging with solid gold coins. He thrust it toward the smiling nomad. "Take this," the merchant pleaded, his voice tinged with a strange, agonizing mix of hope and desperation. "Buy a home, hire some guards, secure your future. Just tell me exactly how to buy the peace you have in your eyes. Name your price, and I swear to you, I will pay it tenfold." Elias looked at the heavy bag of gold, its metallic clinking completely foreign and out of place against the gentle rustle of the cherry blossoms. Slowly, the nomad reached out, not to take the bag, but to gently push the merchant's trembling hand away. "You cannot buy an empty room by filling it with more furniture," Elias said softly. He tapped his chest, right over his heart. "True wealth isn't the endless accumulation of things to protect. It is the deep, unbreakable gratitude for what you already hold in your soul. Contentment is a conscious choice, not a purchase." The merchant's arm slowly dropped to his side. The gold pouch, which usually felt like the most important and powerful thing in the entire world, now just felt incredibly heavy and entirely useless. Completely forgetting his royal stature and the watchful eyes of his guards, Kalen collapsed onto the dusty grass right beside the nomad. His immaculate, expensive silk robes dragged in the dirt. But for the very first time in his adult life, he simply didn't care. He sat in total silence, staring blankly ahead, watching the stray dog happily lick the last crumbs of bread. Elias sat back down beside the broken billionaire, offering no judgment, only a quiet, grounding presence. A warm afternoon breeze swept through the valley, sending a spectacular flurry of pink cherry blossom petals swirling around them like a gentle, fragrant snowfall. The stray dog, having finished its meager meal, trotted over and rested its scruffy chin gently on Kalen's silk-covered knee. The merchant flinched at first, instinctively wanting to shoo the dirty animal away. But then, tentatively, his shaking hand reached down and stroked the dog's head. A single silent tear escaped his eye and rolled down his pale cheek. For a long time, the only sound was the gentle wind rushing through the cherry blossoms. Finally, Kalen broke the silence, his voice barely a fragile whisper. "I have built an empire so massive that it requires all my strength just to keep it from crushing me. How do I even begin to let it go? I don't know how to be anything else but a merchant guarding his vault." Elias smiled kindly. "You begin precisely where you are right now. You stop trying to control the wind, and you simply allow yourself to feel it on your face. When you clench your fist tightly to hold on to water, it all slips through your fingers, leaving you with nothing but aching, empty hands," Elias explained, demonstrating the rigid motion. He then slowly uncurled his fingers, letting a soft pink petal drift onto his open, relaxed palm. "But when you open your hand, you can hold a vast, cool pool of it. Your wealth is exactly like that water. By hoarding it in absolute terror, you are draining the life out of your own soul. The only way to truly possess your blessings is to hold them with an open hand." A profound, irreversible shift occurred within Kalen's weary heart. The suffocating band of anxiety that had gripped his chest for a decade finally began to loosen, giving way to a strange, completely unfamiliar sense of lightness. He took a deep, shaky breath of the fragrant spring air and slowly stood up. He looked back at his 12 armed guards who were scanning the peaceful trees for imaginary threats. For the very first time, he didn't see loyal protectors guarding his life. He saw ordinary men trapped in the exact same exhausting cycle of fear he had created. With a newfound, quiet resolve, Kalen unclasped the heavy, ornate golden chain from around his neck. He then shrugged off his extravagant, jeweled overcoat. Walking over to the captain of his guard, he gently handed over the incredibly valuable items. "Take the carriage back to the estate," Kalen instructed, his voice remarkably steady and calm. "Distribute this gold among the men, and tell the household I will not be returning tonight. I am going to walk." The captain stared in sheer shock, as the merchant stepped away from the armored cage that had defined his entire existence. As the massive iron-plated carriage slowly rumbled away down the dusty road, a profound, enveloping silence settled over the beautiful valley. Kalen stood alone in his simple, white linen undertunic, completely stripped of his armor, his status, and his overwhelming burdens. The golden hour of the setting sun cast a warm, radiant glow across his face, washing away the pale, sickly pallor of his endless anxiety. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and listened to the gentle rustle of the trees. He was unprotected, completely vulnerable, and yet he had never felt safer in his entire life. Kalen turned back to the nomad, a genuine, relaxed smile finally breaking across his weary face. Elias didn't say another word. He simply nodded, tapped his weathered walking stick on the ground, and began to stroll down the sunlit road, the stray dog trotting happily at his heels. Kalen fell into step right beside him. He didn't know where he would sleep that night, or what he would eat tomorrow, but for the first time, the unknown didn't terrify him. It felt like a vast, beautiful canvas waiting to be painted. He had lost his fortress, but he had found his soul. True wealth is never measured by the size of your vault, the weight of your gold, or the height of the walls you build to protect yourself. It is measured by the lightness of your spirit and your capacity to be deeply grateful for the present moment. A billionaire who lives in constant fear is nothing more than a prisoner to his own fortune. But a man who finds absolute joy in a shared crust of bread and a gentle spring breeze, he is the wealthiest man in the world. Ask yourself today, what are you holding on to so tightly that it's holding you back?